Welcome back to the Thoughts from Your Gal Pal podcast. My name's Clara. I'm the gal behind the thoughts, and I'm really working to have not a weekly, my bad, a monthly release cadence for these podcasts because that seems somewhat reasonable with the current cadence and busyness of my life. With that, I've definitely pushed this one to the edge here because it is the last full week of February, and here I am scrambling. But my guest today has come to the rescue. My guest is my sister, and we are going to talk about something that she has an intimately unique perspective on. And I'm not talking about pumping or breastfeeding, which has been her journey for the past how many months? Eight, nine
It'll
months?
be 9 months and a week. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, you're one of those moms that posts every month. It's no, did
Yeah.
you delete Instagram? I've been meaning to
I
ask you
did.
about that.
Yeah. Well, it's technically deactivated, but I just really wanted to streamline my time. So my only social media right now is Reddit and
Facebook. I'm
Facebook.
kidding.
Well, I have Facebook for work. So there is like a Facebook account out there, but my profile picture is for work, and Pinterest. That's
So
it.
you have Reddit and Pinterest
Mhm.
and Snapchat.
And Snapchat. I don't really count Snapchat because literally the only people I Snapchat are my family, and so
Yeah.
it's like just an alternate form of like texting almost.
I think we
So
need to streamline our. I really hate that there's two different Snapchats that get the exact same snap every
yeah,
time.
I know.
But it kind
We
of
could
is.
just add mom to our kids.
I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah, because there's
We
really
should
no.
rename it.
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Let's do that because I think that okay, as an aside. So something, yes, we're kind of alluding to a number of things about your life, but today we're going to talk about something that I think you have told me that there's not a lot of dialogue about maybe in the spheres that you've looked at, but it's on dating slash being married to slash having kids with a partner that is in academia. So I talked to mom about this yesterday. I couldn't remember what the well-known analogy for academia is, and I said like the heavens, the pearly gates, and then I'm like, wait, that's all, and it's the ivory tower. It's ivory tower. So it's definitely a sense of being secluded and removed from modern life, and I think you had to kind of adapt and learn through that process. And so I've structured the questions today. I'm going to try to keep us on track because if not, I really meander unnecessarily. So in efforts to keep us on track, I'm going to set about a 3-minute timer for each question just so we can
Okay.
move through these and it's not an hour-long episode because you got to work. People don't want to listen to it. So just to start off, why don't you tell us who you are, where you live, what you do for work?
Um, I am Emily Thorson. I live in Tallahassee, Florida. I am the finance and HR manager for a 8-person nonprofit called the Innocence Project of Florida. So we work to get people who are wrongfully convicted out of prison who are in Florida. So I do like finance and HR is my job title, but I've sort of expanded to do everything that's non-legal in the office. So fundraising, communications. Ideally, I have like a team of people who are helping me with this, but right now it's just one person. So, yeah, I am also a 10-year cat mom, a 7-year
Mhm.
dog mom, and a 9-month mom to a human. So that's
A
me.
child. And are you're hiring, right? If anyone's listening out
I
there,
am hiring.
give a plug, give
If
a
you
plug.
are based in Tallahassee, we are looking
Or you want to
for
move?
or you want to move. We are looking for a communications and community outreach coordinator. So someone who does PR, public awareness, speaking, things like that. We're looking for a creative content specialist to do graphic design and social media. And beyond those positions, we are undergoing a strategic plan to add an additional 9 positions over the next 2.5 years or so. So keep up and look at floridainnocence.org for future job postings. because I do the recruiting too, we're a little slow sometimes to get the ball rolling, even after we've posted a position. But if you would like to work
Well, yeah,
here,
you're stretched thin. It's a cool opportunity, and
mm-hmm.
yeah, you never know who knows somebody. So
Right,
good plug
right.
there. How'd you meet Scott? What was the year? What was happening? Tell me about your first date, all the things. Scott is your
Yes.
husband. That's who we're talking
Scott is
about.
my
He's
husband.
like the
Yes.
elephant in the room.
He is. So Scott and I met in, we started communicating in late September of 2016 via OkCupid. He will tell everyone I messaged him first. He had a
Sure, he
little
loves
blurb.
to talk about that.
He does. He had a little blurb on his profile about board games, and a few weeks prior is when we as a family had gone to Mexico Beach on vacation, and Taylor introduced us to the world of strategy board games. And little did I know
I'm gonna get him
how
on the podcast about this
yeah.
because
This is, I mean,
anyway, go on.
he's even more into it than Scott is. But anyway, opened our world and added this whole new thing I never knew existed. Scott had a thing about it. I messaged him. We also were like a 92% compatibility match. And I think the highest I had ever otherwise seen was like in the 70s. So we just gotta test the algorithm, I guess, and see if this is really, really real. So we went to a bar. It wasn't a bar. It was like I guess a gastropub where they have like they brewed their beer like in house, but they only served it there. But they also served like it was a restaurant. So anyway, we just went out. I would say like we hit it off pretty quick. He was really excited from the beginning, which was a little bit off-putting, to be totally honest, and he knows this. Like, definitely those first few weeks, I was like, whoa, boy, like, just, like, pump the brakes, calm down a little bit. I was running a marathon. It had been my first in, like, 3 years, about 2 weeks after our first date, so I was really, focused
Training.
on that and yeah, finishing off that training cycle well. And he was just ready to jump right in. And overall we did move pretty fast. So our first date was in October, and then the next July we moved in together. So that's that.
Dang.
That's how we met.
Another plug for that true love can exist on dating apps. So refer to my previous episode with Peter and Oliver about online dating. Definitely is out there, and you're the prime example of that. Mm-hmm. So the reason Scott was in Atlanta and you were working at CHOA at the time, he was in Atlanta for a PhD program at Georgia Tech. So obviously you probably learned that when you started communicating. So compared to men, we're both straight, men who you had dated prior, what was it like dating someone who at the time was in school? He was a PhD candidate. Was there anything that stuck out to you at that time that was maybe a little bit different than people who you had dated in the past?
Yeah, I mean, at the time that he was where he was in his program, he graduated, defended whatever, about 1.5 years after we started dating. So he was in the second half. So he was very much into research. He wasn't taking any more classes. His days were like, they were not 9 to 5 days. He had a lot of freedom in terms of when he started his day, when he ended his day, but he also had a lot of work to do. It's not like he wasn't ever working. So I would say in the first few months, it wasn't maybe as obvious, I guess, because we weren't living together, how much work he actually had and how much he was actually doing. But he worked a lot. In general, I think going to grad school, like, this is not uncommon now that I've met many other people who have been to grad school, like research, PhD type grad school, is like, he's very inquisitive about people. And I think, and like me included on our first date, like to the point where, I don't know, it was nice to just not like brush over the same like first date conversation and like topics like, how many siblings do you have, where's your next vacation, like, those things. Like it was and of course I can't remember specifics now, but like he really like went deep that first date, and I was like, it was refreshing in a way. I think the other thing that I is kind of funny because for better or worse, like his career and navigating his career along with mine and just everything else we want from life has like been by far like the biggest challenge that we faced as a couple. But at the same time, I had been on so many dates with people who hated what they did. And I didn't
Mm.
realize that I really just like it's I hate to say it because of course like everything like people hate parts about their job, but like people who are like day in and day out, like I hate my job, like I don't like what I don't like my boss, and just like complaining. I don't know, like I just sort of was over it, and so like
It
to
really
meet
grinds
someone,
on you.
yeah, it
Yeah.
does because I mean I liked my job. So before I moved to Atlanta, I'm from Atlanta, but I worked in New York. I worked at Pepsi. I enjoyed that job. I enjoyed my job at Choa. I enjoy my job now. Of course, there's parts about every job that aren't ideal, but like I just felt like I don't know. I was sort of over that. So to meet someone who was like really passionate about what they did was really attractive to me,
Mm.
despite the challenges that it would later bring. So yeah, and to be honest, like I think most everyone that I met who through Scott who was in similar programs, like they've really it's a lot of work, but they ultimately really like what they're doing. So that's different
I
than at
think,
least what I encountered, when I was
yeah,
dating
I didn't
around.
think that that was going to be your answer, but it makes sense. And it's kind of like I'm somebody who, not that I actually really like my job, but it's not probably like, I always say it's the least interesting part about me because I'm
Mm-hmm.
somebody who like very much skews my time on my hobbies. Like that's what I want to talk
Yeah.
about on a date. However, it is attractive when somebody's really passionate about what they do because I think it indicates their deeper level of, are you negative and or are you change
Yeah.
oriented? Like if you hate something so much, are you actively interviewing for other jobs or are you looking for
Right.
a change within your organization? Because if you're just going to bitch about a situation, then you're always going to be somebody that bitches about a situation. Whether
Yep.
it's like it's I totally get what you're saying.
Yep.
So I wanted to touch on this a little bit with the ivory tower mentality, more in the dating
Mm-hmm.
years. um, Folks there are typically a little bit more sheltered and not in touch with the modern, I don't want to say the modern world, that's not true, they're actually on the cutting edge, I would think, like they're in the future world. So
Yeah.
what is it like to as you were getting to know him and like subsequently moving through your relationship, to be with somebody who was so laser focused in one world, whereas you were, I mean, you were working in healthcare, so you had a touch in medicine and finance and everything,
Yeah.
and he was doing one research on one really specific topic. Did
Yeah.
you, yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it is like I will say in terms of more of like a culture perspective, like academia versus more corporate, which, Cho is healthcare, but it was a much more
Yeah, it was
corporate
corporate.
environment than like um what Scott was dealing with. I I would say like so he had done a co-op in undergrad at like a
Okay.
defense contractor, so I think he had a little bit like of more exposure to that. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
And
certainly
maybe
all
I'm
of his
overstating this,
no,
like,
no, no. I mean, it is a thing, and I think certainly all of his friends, in Atlanta, particularly because that's why he moved to Atlanta, was to go to Georgia Tech, were um, also in grad school, like in that world. And so, I mean, there were just certain things like I think socially, pretty much everyone I worked with and socialized with was like a 9 to 5er. So if something came up on the weekends, like, I mean, there were frequently times where it's like, oh, Scott's got to work, like he can't participate in that. And I mean, that kind of sucks. Of course, at the time he didn't have to take out any loans to go to grad school, and he got like a very very modest stipend that like barely allowed him to live. But I mean, we like he was not out whining and dining me at like the
no,
top.
yeah.
Not that anybody at the time, I was 25, almost 26 when we met, like, but he wasn't like that. Just wasn't really part of our relationship. I mean, we did plenty of nice things together, but it
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't like I think that's maybe an experience that like I mean some people it might be important to them to be able to like do these like fun things and expensive things when they're in their
in
20s
the
and
dating
working and
years.
childless. Yeah. But that was just not like a part of our relationship, and part of like mostly given the fact that he was a poor grad student at the time. But yeah, I mean, it's funny, like I remember him telling me about, there was somebody else that he knew in his grad program who straight up said like he would not date someone who was not also in grad school or pursuing higher
Whoa.
education. Yeah, I mean, not to say, I think like, for lack of a better term, like it was more like a cultural difference, that like someone who's just like out in the working world, like wanting to make money, like doesn't understand, like you want someone who
The
shares those
grind and the
passions.
passion.
Yeah. And like, I'm like, to use a trope, finding the cure for cancer, and like this person's just like getting check. But I mean, Scott was never that way. And, but I think, I mean, it's like not always easy. Like it would be like if we were both, if I had certain expectations, which I didn't, but probably many people in my situation would have had expectations in terms of like, what do we do on dates? What's your flexibility like? Where, sure, let's run off this weekend and like go have a weekend away. And like Scott financially and like work wise was not able to do that. So had I been someone like that, I think it would have been difficult to like continue our relationship.
Progress.
And maybe that's why people just are like, well, I'm not going to even like, I'm just going to stick with other people who get it, So
Yeah, so I'll kind of throw in a question that I had scheduled for later, but you've talked a lot about how I don't know where this exists, Reddit, YouTube, I don't know, that there are resources for people who are both in academia. So the couple both are, but there isn't much for mixed couples, which for that sounds wrong.
Yeah, like
We're not mixing races or cultures, but mixing profession types. So first of all, what resources are there out there for people who are both in academia, and what are they talking about? And then,
so
yeah,
it really came down to like jobs. So there is a concept, and I don't know if this is a concept that's like unique to academia. I've heard of it.
It's kind of like the military too.
Yeah, like particularly when I worked at CHOA, we would talk about a trailing spouse. So essentially, they know that Professor X or Postdoc X, who is, about to be done with their 2-year postdoc at UF, is coming to look for a job. They have a spouse who's also a PhD doing a postdoc at UF. We should try to find, like, they're basically not going to take the job unless we also find a placement for that person. So that partner, is, okay. For their partner. So that's like a thing that exists, and that a very strong candidate can like more or less demand, like, hey, my spouse also needs a position if I'm going to take this one. So a lot of this kind of came up in 2 parts of our relationship. So the first was when he finished his PhD and got a postdoc position at University of Florida. So a postdoc is like just that, a 2-year, it can be any long, but typically at least 2 years, postdoctoral research work that you do before you get a faculty position. It's almost, occasionally people go right from graduating with a PhD to becoming faculty, but it seems like 9 times out of 10, there's a postdoc thing. So we knew it wasn't going to be forever. It was only, I think, even a year-to-year contract. So we decided to I was making a decent salary at CHOA. We decided to do long distance for those 2 years. And just in general, I think there was like, it could have been one thing if I was a fellow graduating PhD and Scott was like, hey, we got engaged about a month after he finished his PhD. So, hey, my fiance also, is looking for a postdoc. There could have been a position there. They could have helped me if he had, was looking for something for me at UF. But it seemed a little less likely where it's like, well, my fiance is like a finance manager, like, I don't know. Yeah. It's just, not that it couldn't have happened, but it was just not as much. I think that infrastructure, like within academia, is not there.
Of
Similarly,
course not, because
when
it's not like they have corporate connections where they'll be like, "Yep, we'll scooter in right here."
right, or
Yeah.
even like within the university, I mean, maybe, but I don't even know. It's like it's not like a faculty type position. And to be
Hmm.
fair, like his PI, like at UF, probably doesn't know like the structure
What's
of like
PI
the
for the listeners?
principal investigator. So he's like the
Okay.
professor, the head of the lab.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
His yeah. So who's a very I really he's a great guy. But anyway, probably does not know like the administrative workings of UF to be able to say, hey, this might be a good department that you could look in and try to find a job. Also, it's a 2-year thing, so we don't know, if they think that I might move on to follow him 2 years after that, it might not work out.
Mm.
So anyway, similarly, when he went over to FSU, or when he got the faculty position at FSU, which is where we are now, or where he is now, they're similarly, they kind of were willing to put in a referral for me within a department if something came up, or if they, if I found a position, they could say, hey, this is a guy who's joining his faculty. You might want to consider his wife, because we were married by then. But it wasn't the same as, for example, there was, when Scott was looking or, in the recruiting process for his position now. So he's a teaching faculty at the FAMU FSU College of Engineering. There was somebody who was applying for being in the recruiting process for a tenure track position within the College of Engineering, whose spouse was also a PhD in engineering. And they told Scott, look, if we go with this tenure track candidate, we have this teaching faculty position slotted for their spouse. So basically, he was told when he left his interview, you're our top direct candidate for this interview, but this tenure track guy is coming in next week. If we really like him and want to make them to offer, we have to offer this position to his spouse.
Wow.
I don't actually know the genders. It could have been flipped, to be fair. But anyway, so then he got a call like a week and a half later, like, hey, we're not going to make an offer to that guy, so this job is yours. So anyway, that's the sort of thing that exists that does not really exist for spouses who are not within like the academic field. So I think it's both, like, again, within academia, that built-in like support for a non-academic spouse doesn't necessarily exist. Mm-hmm. And even outside of that, and this could always just have been my own perception of things, I felt like there was maybe like, oh, you can get a job anywhere, which I always like found a little bit dismissive. And this was not how Scott felt about it. He knew how much, again, everything has worked out very well for us, and I'm very happy with where I am now, but he knew how much I liked that job, my job at CHOA, and to just be like, oh, you're a finance manager, like everywhere is finance managers, you can just find a job. That was a little difficult to, feel like I was being taken seriously by maybe the community at large, I will say.
Yeah, I could see that being as dismissive and just kind of, it's again that whole, oh, you're just getting a check, I'm curing cancer. It's kind of that
right.
That lack of, maybe not lack of respect, but a lack of understanding to how nuanced finding a job can be. I mean, especially now when people are getting laid off left and right, it can be intimidating. So we've kind of spoken a lot, maybe not about the challenges, but about kind of the friction that you've encountered along the way. But what I guess, so backing up, or not backing up, you're now married and you have a child. So that's your current life stage.
Yeah.
As your relationship has developed, what advantages have you seen to having a partner who is in academia? Because there are noted advantages.
Oh, yeah.
So talk through some of those.
Ultimately, like, I think whether it's in academia or not, I mean, I think most people who stick through grad school, postdocs, whatever, and pursue academia are really passionate about it. And I will not ever underestimate like how much it means to have a spouse who like really loves what they do despite the work. So that is, but that could exist anywhere, but that's a big advantage. In terms of now that he is faculty It's been a lot of work over the last 2 years for him to, uh, he's full-time teaching, like for the first time. Some of the classes that he's taught, he has been the first one to teach them. So all of the
Having to
materials, the
establish
tests, like,
curriculum.
yeah, that's a lot of work. I've already seen, so this spring is like the first time he's teaching a class for the third time. And it is just way less work than it was the first year. It got better the second year, but really starting to see like the fruits of like all of that prep work that he's done over the last 2 years. I mean, so there is work, but in terms of the actual like day to day, I mean, he more or less has to be on campus when he's teaching, which is, he teaches for an hour and a half every day, like Monday through Thursday. And then he has labs too that he's there for, but otherwise he can like be at home if needed. And then the biggest advantage is, or the biggest thing that we've really reaped so far is he was able to take paid leave all this past fall semester. So our son was born in May, and I took 12 weeks off. We actually ended up having, with just the timing of this, he had gone back to work about 2 weeks after he was born. Scott had gone back to work, but we had about 3 weeks of overlap after his summer classes ended and when my maternity leave ended. And so then he stayed at home with our son for from August through December, which it is something he can only do once. So any future kids we have, he's not going to be able to do that again. But I mean, for us, I think it was really important one, we didn't, have to start or pay for daycare until, Jonas was 7 months old. But also, just kind of, I think for better or worse, like as a mom or as the female, like if you want kids, you're sort of like conditioned to think about what that might look like day to day, like your whole life. Also in pregnancy, people are always talking, not that people weren't talking about Scott about what it might be like to be a dad, but I think for him, it was really important for him to like get into dad mode and that'll set him up for the next, like, well, the rest of our lives to some degree, but particularly like having young kids and understanding like what it takes and, their routines. And it's just, been nice that, he was the primary caretaker for our son for those 4 months. And, now it feels like we can be much more balanced going forward. And I think that could be just something that's unique to us. But that was a huge advantage of being, able to.
And is that common? Do you know if that's common among universities, or is that just a Florida State thing?
So I don't know parental leave specifically, but in general, I know universities offer sabbaticals to faculty. So I think a lot of times that's something like they have a special project they want to work on and they can take off a semester to go focus on this. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's pretty common. To be fair, Florida is not exactly known as the most like progressive place. So the fact that a university in Florida offers a
public university,
public university, I think is, hopefully a good indicator that that's available more widely. And I think, going forward, it is just the little things like, they're closed the week between Christmas and New Year's. So that's just like always off and we never have to worry about taking vacation. You get the breaks in between semesters, you get spring break off. And there's work to be done during that time if you need to, but it's not like that kind of like, yeah, it's a more, you kind of follow like the academic calendar, which has some more built-in flexibility than like a lot of more kind of corporate type environments.
So we'll close with this, because we've talked about a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But if somebody was engaged to a person who is, if you could talk to you 4 years ago, 5 years ago, what would you say? You're gonna have to move to some weird places.
Yeah. So
Tallahassee
yeah,
isn't
I mean,
shitty. It's just like really
no,
random.
I personally really like it. I mean, I knew when he moved to Gainesville, I was like, oh, a college town. This is like kind of great because it's diverse, it's progressive generally.
Wait, for Gainesville or for Tallahassee?
Well, Gainesville being a college town, but it was something I
Okay,
never really like thought about before as a place to live. But yeah, I mean, college towns in general are going to be like diverse and
sure.
progressive. But you know, I don't have to like they're smaller, don't have to deal with the traffic that I dealt with in Atlanta. Like we are under contract on a house that's 5 minutes from my office. Yeah, I mean, just like the lifestyle is like, I think it's going to suit us really well for this phase of having kids. The only thing that sucks is the airport. Like there's, you've got to connect and it's expensive and all of that. But yeah, I think I would just say like, I mean, it is really worth it. And to just stick it out if you, I hope I'm not losing my internet connection. Sorry. Um, it's I think the end game, if you can get there, is you're gonna for us, like we knew we wanted to have a family and have flexibility to both have fulfilling careers but also be there for our kids, and we have gotten to a point where I feel confident that we can do that. So I guess just like hang in there. I think the
Hmm.
communication that is required, I mean, not everybody ends up having to be long distance, but that was a big part of our relationship over the last I guess it was 2018 to 2020 that we were long distance. So, you get creative, but I do think like you become stronger as a couple. And yeah, I mean, in some way, like adjusting to parenthood has not been like easy by any means, but I do think had we not had any other things that we had to navigate, it would have been like a lot harder on us as a couple. I think we've generally done it pretty well, and we still feel like very happy together, even with like all of the things that have come at us the last few years, good and bad.
Stick with it. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing this. Also, I feel like I'm so quiet. I'm usually so much more jazzy, but this is me at 10:30 in the morning. I'm not a morning
Yeah.
person. And some people might say, "Well, Claire, 10:30 really isn't the morning," but it is for me, as we all know. Um, anyway, thank you for sharing. I hope Scott. I don't even know if Scott listens, but he'll be. I
He
could.
was very nervous about, he was like, well, what are you gonna say? Like, I was I'm not gonna,
We need to be
when
like,
when I
we
said the
need to,
topic,
when on YouTube when it's like, oh, uh, like
live react.
PhD students reacts to his wife's bitching about his career. Go
No,
on,
I
sorry.
mean, I was like, I'm not gonna like, yeah, I mean, he's no, it's good. I think he was like everything I said was just like very practical, what goes on, but I wouldn't change it. I'll say that I would not.
Yeah.
I I love Scott, I love our son, I love what we're able to do, so I wouldn't change it for anything. uh not to be a sap, but